For 8 years, Ukraine has waited, biding its time, hunting and chasing something that Russia once used to hurt Ukraine. The wait was necessary. Ukraine didn't have what it needed to take out its target, but now the wait is finally over. Ukraine just made Russia pay in spades for an incident that took place in 2018. The retaliation was merciless. The target was destroyed in the seas that Russia believed it controlled. If revenge is a dish best served cold, Ukraine just delivered a sub-zero dose of destruction that has left Russia reeling. We begin our story in 2018. Having begun its campaign of aggression against Ukraine 4 years before, illegally annexing Crimea in the process, Russia was riding high. It had complete control. The Black Sea, the Sea of Azov, and the Kerch Strait that connects the two were all Putin's to manipulate. And in November 2018, Russia started throwing its weight around. The Black Sea Fleet closed off the Kerch Strait for non-military ships to punish Ukraine for what it claimed to be trespassing into Russian territorial waters. A lie, of course. Crimea doesn't belong to Russia, and neither do the waters that surround the peninsula. Among the ships in Russia's naval blockade was an FSB patrol vessel named Izumrud. That vessel, along with several others, took part in an escalation of the Kerch Strait blockade in 2018. It played its part in the seizure of 3 Ukrainian naval vessels in the Kerch Strait, which was an operation that involved Russia's ships ramming into Ukraine's vessels before opening fire on them as they attempted to transit from Odessa to Mariupol. The incident was a severe showcase of the aggression that Putin would later escalate into a full-blown invasion less than 4 years later. 6 of Ukraine's soldiers were wounded in the attack, and Russia's forces captured the crews of the Ukrainian ships. Moscow was trying to send a message. All of the sailors were thrown into prisons, where they languished for almost a year before finally being sent back to Ukraine as part of a prisoner exchange in September 2019. At the time, Ukraine could do nothing about Russia's actions. It has no real navy to speak of, and the drones that have become a hallmark of Ukraine's defense of its territory against Russia were barely a twinkle in the collective eye of the Ukrainian military. So Ukraine just had to take the insult, absorb the blow. But Ukraine never forgot, and it would not forgive. For 8 years, Ukraine waited for an opportunity to take revenge for the capture and wounding of its sailors in 2018. Even as Putin launched his invasion and war broke out all over Ukraine, eyes were on the Izumrud. All Ukraine needed was the right weapon and an opportunity. Fast forward to July 14, 2026, and the naval forces of the Armed Forces of Ukraine posted a simple message to Telegram. The Navy of the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed the border guard ship of the FSB of the Russian Federation, Izumrud, the Ukrainian Navy declared, while noting the ship's involvement in the Kerch Strait incident 8 years before. And if anybody doubted that Ukraine knew exactly what it was targeting when it took out the ship, the Navy eliminated those doubts by making it clear that revenge was a factor. Retribution is inevitable. More to come, came the chilling message from Ukraine's Navy. It had taken close to a decade of patient hunting and weapons development, but Ukraine finally took out its target. And it wasn't just the vessel itself that Ukraine destroyed. Russian sailors are dead or wounded as a result of the attack on the Izumrud, Ukraine says, and the attack took place during a night when Ukraine's drones took out 11 other vessels in the Sea of Azov. So what we're seeing here isn't Ukraine pouring everything that it has into taking out a single warship. Ukraine now dominates the waters that Russia used to oppress Ukraine 8 years ago. The Izumrud isn't the big bad bully it once was to Ukraine. It's just another ship, among many, that has had an unfortunate meeting with a powerful drone and far too much water. Lost in the crowd, lost to Russia. The perfect fate for a ship that once symbolized Russia's dominance over Ukraine. Ukraine has its revenge after 8 years, but questions still remain. How did Ukraine pull it off? And what practical impact does the attack have on the Ukraine war? We'll start with the former. Ukraine's Navy revealed that the weapon that struck the Izumrud wasn't a standard aerial drone. Ukraine had something much more devastating in mind. A new maritime drone named the Sargan 3000 was key to the strike. Described by Ukraine's Navy as a maritime uncrewed complex, the Sargan 3000 is something of a mystery when it comes to Ukraine's sea drones. We know that it was one of the newer additions to Ukraine's growing fleet of uncrewed vessels, but it seems to be in the shadows of the far more famous maritime drones such as the Magura V5 and the Seabane. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken about the Sargan 3000 before, calling it a multi-purpose platform that is both maneuverable and versatile enough to complete all sorts of missions, including strike operations. But beyond that, we don't know much, at least when it comes to specifications. The Sargan 3000 only entered formal service in the Ukrainian Navy in 2026, but beyond that, information about the Sargan 3000's speed and payload is classified. However, we do know a little about how damaging this maritime drone can be, and not just from the sinking of the Izumrud. Back in April, Euromaidan Press reported on what appeared to be the first deployment of the Sargan 3000 into the Black Sea. Again, Ukraine didn't publicly disclose anything. However, a Ukrainian military blogger named Serhiy Misyura said that drones seen in a video montage published by Ukraine's Navy during this time appeared to be the new drone, which Misyura claimed can be armed with both guns and missiles. The former may not have been enough to take down the Izumrud, but the latter, that's a very different story. Other indications of how effective the Sargan 3000 can be came from a hint that the Ukrainian Navy spokesperson, Dmitry Pletenchuk, dropped when Ukraine took part in the REPMUS military exercises that took place off the coast of Portugal in 2025. Pletenchuk indicated that Ukraine's new maritime drone had taken part in that exercise, and that was notable because it was the REPMUS exercise that saw Ukraine's drones sink a NATO frigate during a war games scenario that showcased just how effective Ukraine's non-traditional navy can be. The NATO frigate was targeted and struck before it ever saw the drones coming. Reports from the Times said that Ukrainian Magura V7s took the frigate down, but the question has to be asked, was the Sargan 3000 involved in that strike? Ukraine didn't say anything more. It has kept a veil of secrecy over the maritime drone for months. The mystery still exists, but whatever the Sargan 3000's technical specifications may be, the Izumrud just learned one thing for sure. Ukraine's new maritime drone can sink a Russian warship. As for the Izumrud itself, there is what we know about the ship and what we know of what has become of it. Launched in 2014, the Izumrud was one of the more modern members of the Black Sea Fleet that Russia thought would be key to its victory during the war. It was certainly a player in terms of Russia maintaining control over the waters that surround Crimea before the invasion, as we saw from the 2018 incident. It isn't a massive ship, measuring 62.5 meters long. The Izumrud can displace up to 750 metric tons of water, and it can reach a maximum speed of 27 knots. It also hosts a helicopter pad, suggesting that Russia can use the ship to launch reconnaissance missions and aerial strikes against targets. The ship itself isn't necessarily a major combat asset. It functions well as a patrol boat, and it was certainly large enough to ram Ukrainian vessels back in 2018, though that's more due to Ukraine not having much of a navy of its own than due to the scale of the threat posed by the Izumrud. Defense blog also points out that the Izumrud is part of the Rubin-Class of patrol vessels, which Ukraine has proven to be vulnerable during the war. In December 2025, Ukraine took out the Razul Gamzatov, which is a Rubin-Class ship like the Izumrud in the Caspian Sea. And in February 2026, another pair of Rubin-Class vessels were damaged in an attack off the coast of Inkerman in Crimea. Maybe we can call these strikes practice runs. The ice-cold main course of revenge was going to be delivered later. As for what became of the Izumrud, well, we really should have been talking about the ship in the past tense during our analysis of its capabilities. It's wrong to say that the Izumrud is a Rubin-Class ship. It was a Rubin-Class ship. Satellite photos have already emerged from the site of Ukraine's Sargan 3000 strike, and they don't paint a pretty picture of what happened to the Izumrud. Those photos reveal that Ukraine struck the ship while it was moored at a pier, and they confirm complete destruction. The vessel has been practically split in half across its entire berth, and it's only staying afloat by virtue of where it was when Ukraine struck it. There are no two ways to look at this, though there are now two pieces of the ship. The Izumrud is done. It's not coming back, repairs are not possible, and Ukraine has its revenge. If this was an isolated strike carried out by Ukraine, that would be good enough. Retribution is sweet. Morale would improve among Ukraine's forces, and Russia would have to deal with the loss of a vessel that was once a symbol of its ability to dominate Ukraine. But the reality for the Izumrud is that its sinking is just part of a campaign. A bigger picture is in play here, and it's a picture that makes the Izumrud a footnote rather than a sole target for Ukraine. Before we explain what we mean by that, this is a reminder that you are watching The Military Show. If you're getting insight from the channel, hit subscribe and click the notification bell so you see more of what we have coming next. Back to the Izumrud. What we're really seeing with the sinking of this ship is a symptom of a problem that Russia has had for a very long time. Russia no longer controls the waters that surround Crimea. In the Black Sea, Russia's woes have been well reported for a long time, and they aren't getting better. The once dreaded Black Sea fleet that was supposed to control the sea that gave the fleet its name is practically no more. About a third of that fleet is destroyed or damaged, and the rest of the ships have retreated as far back as they can get. Not that this helps much. Ukraine's aerial and maritime drones now have enough range that they can strike Black Sea Fleet ships at any time, and Russia knows it. We saw that in April when Ukraine launched an attack against the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk. That's where Russia's warships retreated to get away from Ukraine, but it didn't matter. A frigate was hit in the attack, and a message was sent to Putin that he has lost the Black Sea. There is now nowhere to run for Russia's ships in the Black Sea, with only its submarines able to do anything in the waterway. That was bad enough for Russia. But now we're seeing Ukraine extend its dominance into the Sea of Azov, which is connected to the Black Sea by the Kerch Strait, where all of this began back in 2018. It's this escalation of Ukraine's naval campaign that explains why we call the sinking of the Izumrud a footnote, albeit an interesting one based on the history of the ship. Russia's reality right now is that the Izumrud is simply one of far too many Russian warships and Shadow Fleet vessels that are being hit by Ukraine's drones in the Sea of Azov right now. Ukraine has spent a little over a week bombarding Russian shipping in the Sea of Azov. In doing so, it's exposed the vulnerability of Russia in another waterway that Russia is supposed to dominate, both in terms of the lack of defenses the stricken ships have against Ukraine's drones and the seemingly complete disappearance of air defenses on the Crimean Peninsula that should be able to stop these strikes. The results have been spectacular. In the 8 days up to July 13th, Ukraine had scored hits against 105 vessels in the Sea of Azov, most of which were Shadow Fleet fuel tankers. However, patrol boats, tugboats, ferries, and cargo ships have also been among the casualties. Ukraine isn't slowing this campaign down. The very next day, the count was up to 116 ships struck, as Ukraine escalates a campaign that is designed to isolate Crimea and show the occupiers on that peninsula that Russia has truly lost control of the waters that surround. The Izumrud may be a more headline-grabbing ship out of the dozens that Ukraine has taken out, but it's still just another ship that Russia has lost as part of a campaign that it seems unable to do anything about. This is a humiliation for Putin. Having positioned himself during his entire reign as the strong man who can protect Russians against anything, he has been exposed as somebody who can't even keep a grip on the one scrap of territory that Russia had managed to claim under his expansionist rule. Russia can't respond to anything that Ukraine is doing right now. The Black Sea Fleet's warships that should be putting a stop to all of this are just hiding as their crews hope that they aren't next up on the Ukrainian docket. As a result, the only response that Russia has been able to muster is to restrict shipping traffic to keep Ukraine's strike numbers down. Russia has suspended shipping through the Don Azov Canal that connects Russia's river network to the Sea of Azov and ultimately to the Caspian Sea. Al Jazeera reported on July 14th that Russia's Ministry of Agriculture now says that the country is looking into securing alternative shipping routes and may redirect cargo as Ukraine's strikes continue. What Ukraine is doing in the Sea of Azov stops fuel and supplies from heading into Crimea, and it also prevents Russia from exporting its grain and oil to other nations, which has an obvious effect on the depleted war chest that Putin uses to fund his Ukraine invasion. Oh, and don't think for a second that Ukraine has forgotten about the Black Sea just because it's focusing most of its efforts on the Sea of Azov right now. On July 15th, United 24 media reported that Ukraine had turned its attention to the Black Sea, and it did so in style, as another 20 Russian ships were hit by Ukraine's massive drone swarms. Among them were 17 oil tankers, a tugboat, and 2 tankers transporting liquefied natural gas. Ukraine says that this is the second stage of a maritime drone operation that started in the Sea of Azov and is now expanding back into the Black Sea. And it's Russia's Shadow Fleet that is feeling the sting. The Izumrud wasn't part of the Shadow Fleet. It was a warship, albeit little more than a patrol boat, but it's another victim of the clear fact that a country that doesn't have a traditional navy now dominates Russia and its hundreds of ships. Ukraine's revenge is just another example of how cowed Russia has become in the waters it was supposed to be able to control easily. According to 1945, Russia's humiliation is growing even more as every navy on Earth watches what Ukraine is doing and sees that there is now a wholesale change in naval warfare afoot. It used to be that the country with more and bigger warships won naval battles. That isn't the case anymore, especially when those battles are restricted to a relatively small amount of water. Russia's responses to Ukraine's drones are getting more desperate. Those submarines that we said are the only things that can operate in the Black Sea right now aren't immune to Ukraine's attacks. They have to stay submerged for as long as possible, and when they dock, Russia is covering their conning towers with lattice cages to prevent them from being targeted by aerial drones. Those towers won't do much about maritime drones, however, and Ukraine just proved that its Sargan 3000 is powerful enough to split an entire ship in two. Russia is scared. It should be. Ukraine isn't going to rest on its laurels now that it's finally completed an 8-year odyssey to take revenge on a Russian ship that once humiliated its navy. The tables have been turned, and that dose of cold retaliation is just one of many that are being shoved down the collective Russian throat. And all of the while, Russia's Black Sea and Sea of Azov woes mount, as does the pressure that all of this places on Crimea. You didn't forget about Crimea, did you? Ultimately, most of what Ukraine is doing in the water right now is the extension of an isolation campaign that is already depriving Crimean occupiers of fuel and making life hell on a peninsula that Russia has long sold as the luxury destination for its people. It's anything but now. It's not just the fuel that is burning due to Ukraine's strikes anymore. The fear is taking hold. Crimean occupiers can see ship after ship right off the peninsula's coast getting hit by drones. That is as tangible a sign that Putin has failed in his defense of Crimea as anything we've seen so far. And when warships like the Izumrud are also being taken out in Crimean waters, that tells occupiers even more about Putin's failures. The waters around Crimea have been lost. And though revenge on the Izumrud is sweet, Ukraine is gunning for the ultimate sugar rush, the sight of occupiers abandoning Crimea in droves that will result from everything that Ukraine is doing right now. Some Crimean occupiers are already on the run, thousands of them in fact. Pressure has turned into panic, and the Kerch bridge that connects Crimea to the Russian mainland is being overwhelmed by the occupiers who want to get out before it's too late. This is what Ukraine really wants, and you can find out more about what's been happening on that bridge by checking out our video. And if you enjoyed this video, we have plenty more waiting and daily videos coming up. See it all by subscribing to The Military Show as we chart Putin's course through his Crimean disaster. And thank you, as always, for watching.